It should be. Here you go. Okay, got it. Perfect. Good morning or good afternoon if you are in Berlin or in Europe or maybe further eastern than that. So, hello. Thank you again for joining us. I'm Nama Blonder. I'm an architect and urban planner with Smart Density. We're based out of Toronto, Ontario, Canada. We started doing these urban design roundtables, I think at some point in September 2023. And it is a simple concept. The project cannot be in Toronto. And that is for the simple reason so we could learn from best practices and bring them home. Every month we have a completely different topic. This month is about transportation, and we have excellent speakers. The format is each of them is going to speak for 10 minutes, and we'll have 10 minutes Q&A. So we're going to wrap it up in about 40 minutes. Let's get started. Teal, over to you.
Good morning or good afternoon. Nice to be here. My name is Till Richter. I work for Tegel Projekt, which is a city-owned company in Berlin, and we are developing the old Tegel Airport. I want to talk about our plans to develop a walkable neighborhood in one part of the former airport. So let's see how this works. So before we start with the walkable neighborhood, I want to talk a bit about where we are located in the city, as many of you might not know Berlin as well. So Berlin Tegel has is located quite central, about 15-minute drive from the parliament and 10-minute drive from the western downtown, so to say, with many industries scattered in the area, and lots of green forest and lakes close by as well. But on the same side, very closely located to the city center, with the districts of Wedding and Reinickendorf in the east of the airfield. If we look at the airfield and think about the rail-based connections that are planned in the area, we can see that there's a tram development happening. This was decided by the Berlin Senate, and the further details are currently in the planning phases. And we have in the east straight connection to the U-Bahn, to the metro line underground, to the underground going straight to Friedrichstraße and downtown. So the whole area, even though it wasn't connected by rail when it was still an airfield, is getting quite some good development. If we look at the Schumacher Quartier and the really living neighborhood or the residential neighborhood, we can see it is in the east of the airfield. You can see the old airstrips here, and this is the area that we are developing. I want to talk a bit about how we got here to when you build in Berlin, when you're developing in a city that is so rich in history, there are some important things you need to know. For us, it's one of the major problems that we are facing at the moment is that the whole area was a airfield or a royal hunting ground from the 1800s. Then it was a military shooting range. Then it was an airfield and rocket testing ground. So we need to have a lot of explosives that needs to be cleared, and that's what's going on at the moment. For all of you who don't know Berlin so well, and of course it was a big battlefield during the World Wars, and after the World Wars, the whole city was decided in 4 sectors, now later known as East and West, and the Tegel was part of the French sector. So the French had control and used the airfield quite quickly after the war. And when the city grew and grew, it later became apparent that it needed a new airport, and that was the TXL that many know and love till this day, and which was recently closed and which we're now developing. So the new airport in Berlin was constructed and opened in 2020. So the old airport was not needed anymore and closed down. When we look at the design, it is quite unique in many ways. It was by very young architects that had a lot of freedom in the design, and it was their first project, and quite interesting, and therefore it is we need to keep it in a certain way as well as a historic monument, and all of that was all the shape was in the hexagon as the main shape, and which you can also find in many ways on the whole area. Yeah, so now I just want to, when we understand that the history and the development was so vital for Berlin, the airport was closed 4 years ago or 3 years ago. We need to ask what's coming next, and the central area will be developed in a business and industrial park. This is the area where the pictures were from that I just showed you, where you can see the hexagon here, and where many new residents will develop new technologies, where we'll have industry and commercial areas, as well as an university campus just in the middle of the old terminal. To the north, connecting this area to the forest and to the lakes will be a nature reserve. It will be kind of similar to Tempelhof if people here know what that is, or can look it up. It is quite a nice place to be, and this will not be the same, but in the same scale of things. Going to the east, there will be a more park-like area and our residential area that we'll be talking about today, the Schumacher Quartier. As you can see, in the overall scale of things, the residential area is quite small, which is for a walkable neighborhood an advantage, I would say. Exactly, that's why I want to focus on. And as we saw before, this is the plot of land that we're talking about, and we're expecting 5,000 apartments with more than 10,000 residents in this area when it is fully built out. The idea is to use timber from the surrounding areas. Berlin is surrounded by many monocultures of forests, and they are developed to be more climate resilient, and so have to taken down and replaced by the trees, and the timber should be used in building the Schumacher Quartier. One of the central points is the Central Park, and we can see that we have 2 main roads on the two sides of the neighborhood, and this is where the car traffic will be, and we have no or very limited car traffic inside this area. So we can we have a quiet and walkable and bikeable area with the park as a central point of relaxation and just kind of the garden of the new residents. Well, of course, we do provide. We are planning to provide spaces for cars to park in. We call them mobility hubs, so they are car parks, but integrated into car sharing, bike sharing, and other forms as well. So you can drive your car into the mobility hub and walk the last mile, so to say, to your home. We see the big advantage that you always find a parking space, and parking is not really as visible in the in the walkable or non-motorized areas as it is in other parts. Well, the Central Park is just not only for recreational time, but it's also very important as the whole area is designed as a sponge city, so the rainwater should stay in the area, and this is all handled in the park. Well, we just have this is what the current planning of the park will look like with the buildings at the back. There's no, you can see that in the center of the whole neighborhood, there's no motorized traffic or no fast traffic, just biking and walking. Well, when you talk about the cross section, how will the bikeways and the streets look like? We do need to build them in a way that they are you can drive on them as they are garbage trucks or certain people with mobility issues do need to reach their front door by car. So or we do have some areas that are drivable but not as designed as a real street. So coming up to 11 minutes, I hope this was interesting to you, and thank you very much. Well, who is next? I
I'll speak
didn't.
next.
So, Taylor, sorry about that. So I'm just giving it over to Taylor from here.
Yes, thank you, Till, and thank you to Nama and to our hosts. I really appreciate the opportunity to join today. Till, thanks for that fascinating talk. Very excited to visit Berlin in however many years and see it. I'm actually drinking coffee today out of a mug from the German embassy in Washington, D.C. So, my name is Taylor Reich, and I work with the Institute for Transportation and Development Policy, ITDP. ITDP is a global NGO advocating for sustainable and inclusive, inclusive urban passenger transport, especially in lower and middle income countries around the world. So we're a NGO focused on sustainable development through urban transportation. Most of our staff is in regional offices everywhere from Mexico to Jakarta. But I happen to work with our small global research team here in Washington, D.C., USA, where I am the data science manager. And so I work on everything from impact evaluation to benchmarking and modeling. And I'm here today to talk about Pedestrians First, which is a toolbox for measuring walkability in cities. It can be used, like any toolbox, by a variety of people in a variety of ways. It can be used by city planners to evaluate proposed designs. It can be used by advocates to measure and see whether their city measures up worldwide. It can be used by architects or landscape architects or designers of any kind. So Pedestrians First is a website. It's here. I'm just going to go ahead and see if I can put the link in the chat here. and you can follow along. And I'm going to focus today on the neighborhood and the street level tools. We will actually be having a new version of the city measurements tool coming out in just a few short weeks. I was actually almost hoping I could do this presentation later in May, but today was the day that worked. So about mid-May, we'll be releasing the Atlas of Sustainable Urban Transport, which will replace the View City Measurements tool and actually provide pre-calculated indicators at the city level all around the world. So maybe I'll come back later and talk more about the Atlas. But for today, I'm going to talk about the neighborhood and the street tools for measuring walkability in a neighborhood, such as the proposed Tegel planned neighborhood or an individual street. So let's look at the neighborhood tool first. This is based off of ICDP's Transit-Oriented Development Standard, which provides a quantitative structure for evaluating transit-oriented development. And this focuses on 11 indicators from that standard that specifically have to do with walkability. So let's get started. You can see there's 11 indicators. If you want to do a full evaluation, you could put in your country, city, and neighborhood names. And that would let you, well, let's test it out. So we can now, check all these boxes for all of these attributes of complete walkways, which is the first indicator that I'm sure that Till and his colleagues are including in the Tegel proposal. We can measure the percentage of blocks and buildings that have these continuous walkways. And then you can submit and see that we've achieved this goal, at least in this hypothetical. But perhaps even more valuably, we can see this list of best practices, examples from around the world of cities that have done this very well. For example, this particular development in Guangzhou, China, Liyun Xiaochu, which is, I think you can see from this picture alone how complete and comfortable those walkways are for pedestrians. We can also see a list of policy recommendations. These are just kind of sketches of policies that have been shown to work in cities around the world, often with links to other resources. We'll move on, take a look at this next indicator and see some other best practices for intersection design. We've really tried to highlight in these best practices, for example, visually active frontage, examples from all around the world. I mean, we've got 4 examples from 4 different continents here, including, I'm sorry, Nama, one from Toronto. I know that was part of the definition of this talk today. And so again, these 11 indicators are hopefully useful for anyone, whether an advocate or a planner or even a policymaker, to take a look at these things, understand what matters for walkability, and also be able to measure walkability in an existing neighborhood or a proposed new neighborhood or a proposed change to a neighborhood. We're not going to go through all 11 right now, but once you get to the end, you can hit the review and sort of export a kind of a report evaluating the neighborhood that you're taking a look at. Let's also take a look at the street measurements. So this one is meant for really zooming in on an individual street, maybe a kilometer-long stretch of streets, just a few blocks. And it can be used on any kind of street, no matter how wide. And let's and this is just a checklist. It's about 40 questions asking yes or no. Some of them, have a little bit more of a technical definition. You might actually have to go out and measure some things. And really, our guidance with the street tool is that you can use it sitting at your computer, but it's really better to go out there, go to the street in question with your phone and do this evaluation as you walk down the street. And of course, as we all of us are urban planners and advocates and so on know, there are always going to be things that you'll see when you visit the street in question that you would never see just looking at pictures sitting at your computer in your office. So we really encourage you to go out in a group of people, making sure you include people of different genders, ages, etc., and take a look at the street in particular. But again, as with the neighborhood tool, we also provide some policy recommendations, including links to other resources, and what we hope is a fairly comprehensive checklist of the features that matter for walkability at the street level. So there are also some other resources here, you know, an explanation of what walkability is and why it matters, and all the various benefits that walkability can bring, including quite a lot of quantitative evidence. I'm sure you're all familiar with all these benefits, but it can be helpful to have this resource showing the specific benefits of exactly how we know that walkability is good for health and the environment and everything else. So because I have just a minute or two left, I'd like to give you a quick sneak peek into the Atlas of Sustainable Transport, which will be coming up again, as I said, for release in just a few weeks. And so this actually measures indicators that matter for walkability automatically at the level of cities and even some neighborhoods without you having to go out and do any data collection. We'll already have these things measured. So you can see here, this is what the Atlas looks like. This is just a screenshot from the beta version, but you can see this is a map of all the cities in the world ranked by the percentage of people who live within short walking distance of a physically protected bicycle lane. So that's one of the indicators, is the percentage of people who live near a safe bicycle facility. You can also look at that within an individual city, Bogota, and see that 43% of Bogotanos live within a short walk of a safe bicycle lane. We can see how that ranks up 39th in the world, just above London. We can also see how it breaks down into different neighborhoods, localidades within Bogota. Or we can look at other indicators, such as people near rapid transport. In this case, mostly bus rapid transport. Change over time, etc. I'm running out of time here, and you know, I can answer more technical questions about the Atlas or about the neighborhood or street level tools of pedestrians first. I'm also happy just to discuss in a little bit more. And thank you all so much for your time. And Hayden, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciated that. That was awesome, Taylor and Till. Give me 2 seconds. Okay, I am so excited. I love talking about parking. I understand that is like a weird buzzkill, but I really do love talking about it. So I'm really excited to talk. Oh, I have to do a timer because I will absolutely talk more than I should. My name is Hayden Clarkin. I work with a bunch of transit agencies. You might have seen me on Twitter or LinkedIn or Instagram yelling about why we need good transit and why we have too much parking in our world, in our cities, in our built environment. So I wanted to talk a little bit about where we are and all of the work we are doing and seeing as to innovative ways as to how we can, what the future of parking looks like. And hopefully that tees off a conversation. So I'm super excited. The future of parking by me. 3 things that we can do, and 3 things I'd like to talk about. 1, retrofitting parking. 2, replacing parking, and 3, limiting parking. These are kind of the solutions as to what I see in the future. So I'm sure everyone's seen this video. When I was talking with Till in our pre-meeting, I was like, I'm gonna show you, we really have a lot of parking in America. So I understand it's an international audience, so that's why I'm just really trying to hone in on how much parking we have. So this is Denver, Colorado. Pretty major city in America in 1920. I would have you all look at this little clock tower right here. This was it in the 1960s, same exact spot. So our country really, after World War II, really started taking on a car-dominated sprawl, and kind of, we saw a huge decay in our cities and a rapid increase in suburbanization and parking minimums. And it's kind of the world we see today. This is Houston in the 1970s. I will say all of this looks a lot different now, but this is where we were at, and this is where we're kind of spending a few decades trying to right size and fix even today. This is the current map of all of the parking, the purple being parking garages and the red being surface parking of Spokane, Washington, a city of a few 100,000 people. So we have a lot of parking, and we need to figure out what are we going to do with all of it in the future. Where I live, New York City has enough on-street parking, and I want to be clear, enough on-street parking. I'm not talking about anything off-street. Enough on-street parking to fill Central Park 12 times. We have a lot of parking. And where we do have transit, like in suburban Portland, Oregon, this is a lot of what we'll see, the land use of what we're seeing. And so it's like, what would this look like if we didn't have trains coming every few minutes versus if we just got rid of the trains in general? I don't think anything would change here. So there needs to be a big change, and we are starting to see it. So the first thing is retrofitting them. Retrofitting looks like making them hold water. We're using them for rain gardens and making them a lot more porous and holding and treating runoff prior to it going into our drainage systems. 2, making them actually greener, like physically greener. 3rd, making them electric with electric charging. And 4, making them permeable. So making them hold water. I live by the Queen's Botanical Garden. It's a beautiful garden. You should absolutely check it out. But one of the things that they've recently added is a pretty large rain garden in order to treat a lot of the drainage runoff that they see, making them actually greener. This is in Lexington, Kentucky. It's a racetrack in Lexington, Kentucky. Obviously, these trees have matured, and this has been the styling of the parking lot for as long as it's been around. But when you talk about urban heat islands and heat island effects, it means something. Like when you see Detroit, Michigan, and you're walking in this neighborhood of just basically parking lots on a hot day, the change of having greenery makes a huge effect. Or if you're ever in Disney World and you decide like, oh, I'm going to park my car down here, which is like a bad idea, to be honest with you. But if you are and you're going to drive, like, good on you. This is the Disney World parking lot. And I don't know if you've ever walked through the Disney World parking lot. It does take about 15 minutes if you don't take like their shuttle service. It is super hot. And so working on just retrofitting our parking lots to be a lot more greener, especially as climate change and the effects of climate change happen, and the world gets warmer. Also, a sad fact, but a fun fact, this image and this image of the actual Magic Kingdom are at the same scale. The parking lot of Magic Kingdom is 20% larger than the park itself. Making them electric, this is quite explanatory, especially as electric vehicles need more places. Being able to retrofit and using existing charging stations and working with car companies and any sort of electric vendor that can provide parking and being able to retrofit this. We see this a lot in California, but we need to see this throughout the world. And making them permeable. This is actually in Germany, but I've seen this on a lot of college campuses where parking is a little, what's the right word? Where a parking lot is not being heavily used. Doesn't see a lot of car traffic, having permeable pavement to take water right then and there is a huge when it comes to treating runoff. So, and then replacing them, like just replacing parking lots, building on them, which is something we need to do in a once in a generation housing crisis that we're seeing everywhere. So that image I showed you of Denver on the left is now, this is what the image looks like on the right. So we didn't have to do much outside of getting rid of a few spaces for cars. This is the Boston Seaport. This is where I'm from originally, the Boston area. You'll see this is the Boston Seaport right here, and this is downtown Boston as it was getting rid of its highway downtown. This is what this looks like now, and all of the rest of the parking lot will be removed. It's already removed, but the image is old. So this is kind of like what we're seeing, especially in cities, as we're looking for infill development, and that's super exciting to see. This is Fairfax, Virginia, on the other side of the river in Washington, D.C. You'll see over a decade, all all of these parking lots are being filled in, especially as we're trying to deal with our housing crisis. And one really cool thing is, but when we talk about retrofitting, is actually not every parking garage can be retrofitted into housing or office space or retail. It depends on the floor plates and the way the design of the parking garage. However, this is a pretty cool, a marketing firm headquarters in Cincinnati, Ohio, built offices, and the bottom 3 floors were parking, but they designed it in a way so that when they expanded, they were able to convert those parking levels to office space, and this is what you're seeing here. And then my last thing is like limiting them. We have parking minimums in the world and in America specifically that are crazy. I mean, we're talking about an apartment requiring 2 parking spaces per apartment. And if you're talking about a 300 or 400 unit building or a 1,000 unit building in which I live in, you're talking about 2,000 parking spaces. That's crazy. And it's also, most of parking spaces are completely, parking policy and minimums are completely like irrespective of what neighboring transit there is. So it doesn't even, the context doesn't even matter in a lot of these. So all of the red you see here, is just the space we have for cars and how do we limit this. This is actually a video that I worked on of if Hudson Yards, the office development, used Louisville, Kentucky's parking minimums, this is how much parking it would take if it was only surface parking. So it takes up 180 city blocks and would displace 150,000 people if we didn't use like 30 parking garages to hold everything. So we obviously have like a lot of work to do. This is Apple headquarters. I don't know if anyone here works for Apple. They say their headquarters is super green. Cupertino, California requires every single office building to have a 1 parking spot, 2 desk ratio. So there are 14,000 people that work at Apple headquarters. There are 14,000 parking spaces. This image, these 2 images are the same. This is Boston, and these are the 2 parking garages. It's the exact same size. And of course, barely anyone uses the parking garages because they don't take in any sort of context into who's getting there, how they're getting there, the type of person who works there, and if they want to drive or not. So we just really need to work on getting rid of parking minimums. And we've seen over the last decade, these are all of the cities and or counties in North America that have gotten rid of parking requirements. And as of yesterday, New York City Mayor Eric Adams is working with the council to remove parking minimums for the entire city. So we're seeing a lot of movement. I'm super excited. Yeah, I want to talk about parking if y'all want to talk about parking. So thanks for letting me ramble. And you can find me here if you want to like yell with me or something. I'm happy to do that. But yeah, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. There are a few questions already. I am to that so we can see each other. Perfect. That was a fascinating also different perspectives, which and different kind of not just perspective, but different strategies, different completely different expertise, which is very interesting. Okay, so a few questions. By the way, Teal, we are also developing here or redeveloping an airport site. Yours is 500 hectare. Ours is 500 acres. So I don't remember the ratio. I should Google it, but yours is much, much bigger. But we in the 500 acres are planning to have 80,000 residents. And I think you in your 500 hectares are planning to have how many residents did you say? In the entire.
Yes, we're having 10,000 inhabitants in the
in that one neighborhood. Yeah.
In the east, and there's some additional smaller units, but the main point is that we're developing an office park in some ways, or a commercial hub. Yes.
Yeah, it's just an interesting comparison that I think illustrates the growth that Toronto is dealing with. Because I also been to Vienna, and we hosted the former deputy mayor of Vienna, where they presented Seestadt. I'm butchering the name, sorry, but that new neighborhood in Vienna, which is the exact same size into comparison to our Downsview Airport redevelopment. And we are more than 3.2 the times of the population that we are planning to accommodate. So it's very, very interesting to see those projects. So I really appreciate the presentation. Okay, so we had a few questions already. Question for Aidan is Aidan, can you see that question? As space is a limited resource, how do you effectively advocate for building actually greener parkings when making space for green reduces square meters for parking lots? Is positioning the need for making urban realm climate resilient enough to have all stakeholders on board?
Great question. I will say that we don't have an issue really with space constraints for parking lots in North America because they are just so big. So just a little bit of context, the parking minimums in North America are built or required for the busiest day of the year. So that's the day after Thanksgiving in America, when we have our Black Friday, which is like the busiest shopping day of the year, that they plan for the busiest shopping day of the year. So actually right-sizing parking is not that difficult. And one thing that I've noticed has been really helpful to get both the public and or any sort of like land developer, whoever owns the parking lot, is actually talking about like green, like climate change. People actually respond well to like very easy things that don't really affect their life. So if you're like, hey, this parking lot actually like helps treat runoff and is actually better for the environment, I mean, can I still park there? Yeah, okay, cool. So like really you're not asking them to do a sacrifice. And in addition to that, a lot of people also respond really well to the aesthetics that come from more green spaces, while also maintaining the parking. So it's kind of a win-win. Yeah, obviously, when you take the parking away to build housing, then we have a problem.
Yeah,
unfortunately,
or
like
a bike lane here, like
correct.
Here we see it all over, but it's like very clear.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see. Okay, I see now where my other, because I saw there were like 5 questions and I see they've already been answered. I wonder if the audience can see the answered questions. Because that will definitely make it, if someone in the audience could let me know if you can see all the 5 questions, so I won't repeat them. I have a question for you, Taylor. Have you seen, or can you, something that I wonder about if your tool could be used in community open houses or a way to engage and educate, or kind of a knowledge sharing platform with the general public. Imagine that we're working on a master plan and now I need to present it. How could your tool be incorporated into the presentation or engaging with the community?
Yeah, absolutely, Nama. Thank you. And thank you again for hosting all of this. So the Pedestrians First tools can be used by such a wide variety of people in different ways. I think there are a handful of ways that I can think of just off the top of my head for how they could be used in a community engagement, open house session, that sort of thing. We could invite members of the community to use the tools to evaluate a plan that had been proposed by city staff. You might want to divide that up into different community sort of groups of participants in order to make it go a little faster. It can take a while to go through the whole thing. If you wanted to use the street tool, you could invite community members to go walk down the street and evaluate it and share their feedback that way with city planners. Different people might give the same street different scores, which would be very interesting. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right to point out that often the people who are using the streets have the most to tell us about what works and what doesn't work. And we've structured Pedestrians First as a quantitative tool, but we'd never mean for it to replace the narrative or the qualitative experience of understanding how actual people actually use a street, neighborhood, or city.
And speaking, Aidan, the question is for you. Speaking of pedestrian first, which is, what do you see around transit-oriented communities? Because what I see is that okay, we have this gold opportunity of designing something differently because we have transit, but then we still design for the cars. We have the same, okay, maybe slightly lower ratio, but you know what Teal presented of having like a one structure parking that you expect your residents to walk 300 meters to their unit would be unacceptable to, I think, the majority of the buyers in North America, or even just the concept of it. And what do you see differently in transit-oriented communities that you would say, okay, at least we're getting this right, or we're not getting this right? Like, how would you differentiate that on the spectrum of how you deal with cars and parking?
Yeah, great question. So there are usually two ways that we deal with transit-oriented communities or like walkable communities, even if there's not too much transit, is one, we try to hide them, which is a lot of what people do in like the UK with like some of the newer master plan communities. They just put them, oh, you can't see the cars, but that doesn't mean it's not car oriented, right? Or at least its infrastructure might not be, but the utility of needing a car for day-to-day everything is still there. And then the second is actually like reducing car usage and living in a place in which you don't need it. One thing that we're not doing really well in North America is shared parking. And so right now, one of the things that we're trying to work on is instead of having requirements for every single lot, how do we have requirements for maybe a neighborhood or maybe a thing? And that gets really tricky because then you have to deal with private ownership and who owns what, and making sure you can time demand for when an office building might need parking when all of the residents who live in that building, in a mixed use building, are gone, and vice versa. So it has been tricky. I will say the one thing that transit oriented communities has been getting right, in my opinion, is the public realm placemaking is actually really nice. As for actually like parking requirements and removing parking requirements entirely, we have not done a great job. But I will say, like the landscape architecture, it's really nice to see how intentional it has been lately. There's actually a project, I can put it in the chat, in Utah, in Vineyard. I think it's called Salt Lake. I forget. It's somewhere in Vineyard, Utah. I'll send it. And that is an entire master plan community. And when you do that, you also get that like nice ability to tell you where the parking is versus trying to retrofit existing communities. This is a completely new brownfield project. So yeah, it's a little bit of a psychological play, isn't it?
I always feel that Toronto, it's something that Toronto is getting very well done. The quality of the public realm. We did remove parking minimums 2 years ago. So Toronto in that aspect is very progressive, and I invite you all to come and visit. Till I will conclude with one question that I said, and maybe I assumed that in Germany it will be more acceptable. Do you hear any pushback on that core parking, like kind of structured parking that people need to park and walk to their unit, or it's actually welcomed because they understand the benefits of more pedestrian-friendly neighborhood that is at the cost of parking not immediately in your garage?
Well, we do have to say that the area is just being developed, so there are no residents there that can complain, so to say. But there are, I do feel like that in the reception when we go out and present the plans, that it is well received. And you said that 300 meters walking distance to your resident is quite far. Well, in Berlin and in German towns, we usually have a lot of on-street parking, and the legal requirement to say a kilometer of walk is acceptable to find the free parking spot, which I think many people would disagree with, but that is the current state of the law. So or the if
That's
you
a fantastic reference for us. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and so we do think, and that is one of the critical points about the Schumacher Quartier, is that we do build a lot of parking. We just put it in in a parking garage.
Yeah.
And so you can ask the question, is that even is it even as walkable as it should be, or is it aren't we just covering it up in some sorts? And I do believe it's a bit of both. As we do plan for public transit and for future developments and shared mobility, and the whole neighborhood will have supermarkets, and there are connections that you can take by foot or by bike or by public transit, so you don't need a car as such, but it's a valid point that we do build a lot of parking in just a garage, and when you offer it, people will use it. That is our expectation.
Yeah. But I guess, well, yeah, at least in comparison to the growth we see in Toronto, it's just a waste of above grade space. But on the other side, Aidan, you showed like how one parking was converted into office space, right? Like at least above grade parking could be either demolished in the future when there's a really low demand or not. Something that with underground parking, like you're stuck with it. Like what will you do with that? Okay, I see there are more questions, but I will wrap it up here. Thank you so much. The recording will be available on YouTube.